Dreaming of a better sleep? Tossing and turning is not your destiny. And Ollie is here to help. Ollie invites you to sink into sweet, sweet slumber to improve your mental and physical health and overall wellness. More than just melatonin, Ollie's ingredients help you unwind your mind for a delightfully dreamy drift off. Sleep is on the way at Ollie.com. That's OLLY.com.
Sam, CityCast membership director and co-founder of the fabulous Madison Minutes newsletter. What's good?
Hey, Bianca.
So I have the luxury of talking to you right now, and I want to ask how CityCast came to Madison. Like, what brought this company to set its sights here on our hamlet?
So, what happened was in about early 2021, Haley and I got started on Madison Minutes, and we were chugging along doing our newsletter thing. But then we heard about CityCast. And for those of you that don't know, CityCast is a network.
God, I love networks. Mycelial, neural, cartoon.
Who doesn't? But what we really loved was how CityCast was hiring local people in each city and sort of just releasing them into the wild to tell their own stories that they thought mattered about their cities. Haley and I both said, we need this. If other cities have this, Madison deserves to have this.
And thank goodness.
Yeah. And so we just reached out to the people at CityCast headquarters, and we ended up really vibing with each other and came to this agreement that CityCast would start a local Madison podcast. We would keep doing our newsletter thing sort of separately, two separate organizations. But then the more that we worked with you, Bianca, we just couldn't stay apart. We worked so well together. So we officially merged last summer.
And it's been beautiful. We're superpowers.
Yeah. And that's how we got here today. But if we're talking about the past, we should also talk about the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are in the middle of our membership campaign right now. So if you love this podcast, if you appreciate how far we've come over the past few years, and you want to keep CityCast Madison and Madison Minutes here for years to come, we're asking you to join us as a member today. And all you got to do that is go to madison.citycast.fm.
Man, I'm so glad we combined forces. The force is strong with us to fight the Galactic Empire.
Yes, to the Rebel Alliance.
Back to our standard programming. Today on CityCast Madison. How will Madison meet its ambitious climate goals? One piece of the pie, geothermal energy. The city's investing in a massive geothermal heating and cooling upgrade to one of their largest public housing developments by Brittingham Park, which has the biggest concentration of housing for low-income residents in the city. And if done, it would be the city's largest geothermal system ever. CityCast's Dylan Brogan sat down with city building design project manager Jon Evans to talk about the plan. It's Monday, March 25th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about.
Hey, Jon, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, you bet, Dylan. Thank you.
So we're having you on to talk about geothermal, but first, do you mind just giving us a quick explanation of what the Triangle Project is? Because, this is a unique project. It's city-owned, run. So can you just tell us a little bit about what the development is?
Yeah, you bet. It's a project that's at the corner of West Washington and Park Street. It's a large triangular-shaped parcel, hence why it's called the Triangle. It's a property that's owned by the Community Development Division, CDA, kind of an independent division within the city.
Pretty much the city, though.
Pretty much the city. It's public housing, so it's subsidized housing. It's generally low-income housing for the most part.
Yeah, and it's existed before, but it's getting a huge $300 million revamp.
Correct. It's a massive project, especially for the city. When you get that many zeros behind a project, it's huge for us. And yeah, it's been around, I think, since the 1960s in some form or another. It's 60 years on, right? And finally getting this kind of redevelopment. So you sort of get one chance to do it every so often, and hopefully you do it right?
Yeah, and that's kind of a little bit a good segue into geothermal because it has this geoenergy component. So what will this geothermal energy be used for within the development?
Right. So the term geothermal energy gets used differently in a couple different applications. So this is not like taking steam from the ground and like generating electricity or like really high temperature hot water, for that type of application. This is more, the more technical term is geo-exchange. So what we're doing is using kind of low grade temperatures in the ground to transfer heat to the ground in the summer and from the ground in the winter through our mechanical systems in the building. It's a very efficient way to heat and cool these facilities.
Yeah, and so, there's several hundred tenants that do and will live in the Triangle redevelopment.
Mhm.
So why is such like a massive improvement to its heating and cooling a part of this project?
Well, the big picture, the city has goals to be basically carbon neutral by 2030. So geothermal is one of those systems that allows us to take our heating source off of natural gas, essentially. For us, some people, outside the city might be on propane for heat, but getting rid of fossil fuels for our heating sources, converting it to systems that run, the equipment is called a heat pump, but it's basically an electric device. So you can take all of your heating energy and electrify it, and then that ultimately allows you to decarbonize. Right now, our grid has a lot of fossil fuel sources still, but the utilities are decarbonizing, our buildings are trying to decarbonize. So over time, we'll be able to provide electricity from renewable energy sources. And then if you use a geothermal system, you have to use less electricity to accomplish that, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the big picture why the city feels this is important from our big picture goals. But for the residents at the property, ultimately it would be lower utility bills. In some cases, they pay the bills directly. In some cases, they're subsidized or paid through vouchers. But ultimately, whether they're paying it directly or they're paying a rental rate, that has that subsidized kind of subsidy built into it, it's lower costs for the residents, lower costs for the city. Whatever that money that we have available to support those properties, it means there's more money going into other features of the property that could be more impactful for the residents.
Okay. Yeah, so like why many of us heat our homes with natural gas, the city is investing in like geothermal and renewable energy to heat and cool the homes that they do own, this Triangle development project. That's the vision.
Right.
And has like the city ever utilized geothermal energy to this scale before?
Not at this scale. This is kind of a massive scale for just because of the size of the project. But we have used geothermal systems in a handful of our other city facilities, mostly in our fire department facilities. We have a handful of these systems in fire department facilities and a handful of these in our library facilities. And then also several of our forthcoming projects will also be utilizing the geothermal systems. So our homeless shelter, an expansion at Warner Park, and the next library. It's a combined library parks facility, but that'll also be using a geothermal system.
Yeah, like the Penny Library has geothermal, right? Or
Yep.
Very cool.
It's basically under the parking lot. So when you park at Penny Library, behind the library, the bore field is what it's called, is underneath that parking lot.
Yes. I remember when it was a fertilizer factory.
Yeah, dramatically different, right? Like,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, it kind of seems incredible to me. I mean, you're essentially putting pipes in the ground and getting the Earth's heat and using that. But like, can you just give us like the 5th grade science explanation of that? Because I don't know, it seems a little bit like magic or something.
Yeah, it kind of is magic, right? In a traditional heating cooling system for a building, let's say your house, right? You have a condenser. It's that little box, smaller than a refrigerator. It kind of sits next to your house, right? It's got fans and there's refrigerant pipe going to it. It's the same thing in a commercial building. It's just bigger. So it's called a condenser. Mm-hmm. Basically, what this geothermal bore field is kind of it's a condenser. Then when you connect what's called a heat pump, so it's instead of in your house, you have a air conditioner, right? It runs one direction. It only provides cooling to your house, and then in the winter, your furnace takes over and provides the heat. What the heat pump is, it can do both of those functions with one piece of equipment. So it's like your air conditioner, but it can run in a reverse direction. So the refrigerant kind of is going one way in a cooling system. It can go that in a heat pump. It can go that way, but then there's also a gizmo in there that lets all the refrigerant run in the opposite direction. So instead of providing cooling to the space, it can provide heating. So that's kind of what's going on in the building. And then if that system needs to reject heat or get more heat, that's when it pulls the heat in from the ground.
The reason why this geothermal project can even happen is because of Brittingham Park, right? Because a lot of holes and infrastructure needs to be put in across the street from the Triangle development. So tell us about that, because there's a lot going on at Brittingham Park for a little while, right, to get this installed?
Yeah, it will be disruptive to the park, but once it's done and installed, you won't know it's there. So that's kind of the beauty of it, especially when you're doing new construction and you have, like in our area, a lot of schools do this because you have available land next to the school. It's all being kind of developed with the project. So it's just kind of a really nice fit. It's a little trickier when you're retrofitting it into an existing facility. It can be very disruptive. So yeah, essentially there's I think it's a soccer field kind of right across from the Triangle.
Yeah, ultimate frisbee.
Yeah, ultimate frisbee. That's going to be disrupted during this project, unfortunately.
What needs to happen at Brittingham Park? You got to dig a lot of holes, right?
Yeah, so what happens first is a drill rig comes in on sort of a grid and drill all these holes and kind of progress through like the ultimate field, right? So every 20 feet, they'll be drilling a hole that's approximately 500 feet deep. And then they drop it's kind of like a black plastic pipe. They drop that in the hole and it goes down, and it's got a fitting on the end that basically one pipe goes down, one pipe comes up. And then when you're done, you essentially have a couple pipes sticking out, on the surface.
500 feet down, it seems like you'd hit water at some point.
You do. When they're drilling, they're managing water that's coming up. You have to make sure it doesn't go to the storm sewer, and that's all part of the process. But you're right, you hit water well before 500 feet, probably in the first 80 feet or so, especially being next to the lake, even probably more shallow than that. Yeah.
Okay, so that'll all be dealt with eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it's a network of pipes underneath Brittingham Park that will pull heat from the earth, and then you'll run it across the street to this development.
Right. One set of pipes goes under the road and into the development. And then that's the fluid that the equipment can use to pull heat and reject heat to the ground.
Okay, well, I mean, it sounds like really kind of tearing up Brittingham Park, but once it's done, is it pretty much going back to what it looks like now, the ultimate frisbee field?
That is correct. Yep.
Okay. So a lot going on underground, but once it's done, you're not really going to.
Right.
All right, science heads, are you curious about the unknown? Gear up, because it's time for the 2024 UW-Madison Science Expeditions Campus Open House. From April 5th through 7th, go explore the campus-wide extravaganza across 6 campus locations at one of the best research universities in the world. You'll interact with UW researchers, visit science venues, see science spectacular shows, and get hands-on at exploration stations set up from dozens of UW research groups. From the far reaches of our galaxy with astronomy to zoology examining microbes, UW-Madison Science Expeditions has it all. And all events are free and open to the public. So go get your wonder on. Go check out a complete schedule of events at science.wisc.edu.
This episode is brought to you by JLL. Get an insider view into the world of commercial real estate with JLL's podcast, Trends and Insights, the Future of Commercial Real Estate. Whether you're curious about making cities more sustainable, the evolution of office space, or AI opportunities, this podcast will help keep you a step ahead. Tune in for candid conversations with business leaders about the biggest trends impacting how we live, work, and play. Subscribe to Trends and Insights now at jll.com/podcast.
So is like geothermal, I mean, it sounds like pretty extensive piping network going to happen, but it's a very green type of energy in the long run, though. I mean, is the trade-off that it's more expensive than other energy sources?
That's exactly right. It costs more upfront because, as you just kind of said, installing a lot of pipes underground is way more expensive than, that piece of condensing equipment that you normally just kind of set next to your building, right? But you're right. The trade-off is more expensive, but in the long run, it saves significant amount of energy. But yeah, we're anticipating somewhere in that 20-30% energy savings.
Okay, so kind of a significant investment up front, but eventually you would hopefully be seeing the savings over the life of the whole project. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
as an owner operator of buildings, it's kind of a no-brainer to invest the money up front to save money in the long run. And we're similar to a lot of folks where we have an operating budget and a capital budget, right? We have not that it's easy to get capital money, but it's a lot easier for us to raise capital money, especially over the last few years with the low interest rates. That's changed a little bit.
No, I hear you about that it's a good investment for the city. But I'm almost more importantly, I mean, the energy bills for the people living in the Triangle redevelopment should be seeing those savings pretty much right away, though, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That's correct.
Okay. So is that about 20-30% lower utility bills? Is that what you're expecting?
Yeah, just from the geothermal system. And then, of course, the facility is being built to higher levels of insulation, newer windows, all LED lighting, all that stuff is going to contribute to lower utility bills too.
Do you consider this a test case for the city to utilize geothermal in more of its projects?
Yeah, this is really, for our climate, this is really the best choice that we have. There are other systems you can use to kind of decarbonize, other configurations of heat pumps, but they don't typically work well in our climate has all the extremes, right? We have really cold, really hot, and high humidity from time to time. And it's hard to find one piece of equipment like a heat pump that can do all that.
So this geothermal system will be able to be used year round?
Correct.
Yeah. So to get back to the Triangle project, I mean, when will this be completed? The geothermal part and just like the whole redevelopment?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about the geothermal system is you kind of want to just install it all up front, even though maybe you don't need that full capacity until all the phases of buildings are done. You don't want to be digging up the park multiple times, right?
No.
So it sort of front loads some of those costs. Between the first to the last phase, it's almost a 10-year project, I believe, because we have existing buildings with existing tenants, and you can't just move them all out and do the project all at once. You kind of have to phase it and okay, we're going to do this part of the project, get it done, move over here. We have plans to make sure tenants are moving out in a sane, logical way, and we're not putting burden on them, right?
All right. So this is kind of a long, slow, but important project that's happening in the city.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Probably in the area, the closest thing that I could compare to it would be the Epic campus, the healthcare company down in Verona. They have, if not the largest, one of the largest geothermal systems in the nation. They're constantly expanding, and most of their buildings are powered by geothermal systems. It's a really impressive operation they have down there.
Yeah, but it's sort of to that level of complexity and scale.
Right.
Well, that's so cool. Yeah.
There's also a lot of large systems around the area. Mainly the suburban high schools are probably the next largest thing. Sun Prairie's high schools are powered by geothermal systems. A portion of West High School in Madison is. Oregon High School, one of their additions, is powered by geothermal. So it's a pretty common technology in our area schools. That's probably the widest application of it in Dane County, I would think.
Yeah. What's your favorite fun fact about geothermal energy that maybe people wouldn't know about?
When I used to design these systems at my previous company, we always did a calculation on how many miles of pipe are in the ground, right? And it was usually several miles. When you start adding up that 500-foot up and down, and then all the pipes that connect everything. So like the footprint could be a football field on the surface, right? But then when you add up all the length of all that pipe under the football field, it becomes miles and miles of pipe that get installed.
Do you have a rough estimate of what the mileage will be for the pipes under Brittingham?
If I had to just shoot from the hip right now, it's probably 20 miles of pipe in the ground.
Hey, Jon, thank you so much for just walking us through what's happening with the Triangle development and kind of big geothermal plans in conjunction with that project. So thank you for just explaining this all to us. We really appreciate it, Jon.
Yeah, you bet, Dylan. Thank you.
That's Jon Evans, Building Design Project Manager for the city's Triangle Project. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with your most eco-warrior friend? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Ciao.